Hey everyone, Katie Skoog here from Simple Life Pattern Company. Today I'm going to show you how to shear. I'm going to share with you some of my favorite tips and tricks. A few things to know before you get started is you should always hand wind your bobbin with a decent amount of tension. We are going to do a whole bunch of different stitch lengths and tensions and find what's best for our machines. Each machine will be a little different, so what works on mine may not work on yours, but just to kind of show you what to look for when doing your practice tests. You should always do a practice test on a little scrap piece of fabric. That way, before you start sewing your garment, you're not trying to rip out elastic thread. So with that being said, go ahead and grab your elastic thread and hand wind your bobbin. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do on my test sample is to write down what my settings are. So this is going to be a 2.5 with a 4 tension. So I'll write that right there, and then I'm just going to go ahead and slip this under my machine and sew a line as straight as I can. One thing when you are shearing, you always need to back stitch. So do 2 or 3 stitches and then back stitch to secure that elastic thread in place. And we'll just go ahead and sew. And back stitch at the end. Another thing you want to make sure is after you're done back stitching, if you have a thread cutter on your machine, you want to make sure that you do not use that when you're using elastic thread in your bobbin. You'll just lift your presser foot and pull it out a little bit here, and then we will trim it. As you can see how stretchy it is. So you want to make sure you still leave a decent tail that's unstretched. So we'll just go ahead and clip that. So, and as you can tell, with the way that you wind your bobbin, and the way it looks on the back, you can see that it kind of scrunched up already. In some cases that's okay, but we're going to keep going. I'm going to keep my tension because my tension seems to be okay. So now my next one, I'm going to do my stitch length. I'm going to bump it up a whole inch. So now we're at 3.5 and 4.0 tension. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run that through. Okay, I'm going to continue doing a whole bunch of different ones, and then I'll show you a close-up of what each one looks like. Okay, you can see all the rows that I've sewn, and I wrote down what my stitch length and my tension were for each of them. You can see that the really small stitch length is too small. Basically, the 4.0 stitch length was my favorite, and usually it always is. So from there on, I decided just to go ahead and make sure that my stitch length was all 4 along all the rest of the rows, so you can kind of see the difference in what tension does. So I know I kind of went a little different way than I said I was going to, but I feel like this is a little bit more informative instead of showing you so many different stitch lengths. But you can see just from this small one right up here that it's just too small of a stitch length. Another thing you need to look for mainly is on the back. On the back here, with that really small stitch length, you can see that it gathered it pretty tight right there. And when we go to steam this to shrink it down even more, it's not going to shrink down a whole lot because of all those loops holding that elastic thread in. So the 4.0 stitch length, which is right here, here's one that's 4. So this one's 4, I can see from the back of the fabric. So from here down, they're all 4 stitch lengths. They look different, and that's because of the tension. So as you can see down here, this is exactly what we're trying to avoid. Do you see how it's going up and down and loopy? Anything that looks like that is a big no-no. What you are looking for is this one right here, where it's a nice straight line with, you can see the upper thread just holding it in right there with those little loops. This one right here has too many loops. This one right here is actually okay. It kind of skipped right there and right here. So if you see that in your line where you're getting a little loop right there and here and there, then you know there's something wrong. So to go back, basically the best one that worked for me was the 4 stitch length and then the 4 tension. So let's go look at these. So these first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I did were all with that hand wound bobbin that was tightly wound. That's why you can see a lot of the gathering already before it's even been steamed. So you can see it stretches out quite a bit. That's because the bobbin was tight. These 2 that I did right here, I did the same tensions that I did on some of these, but with a loose bobbin. This is one that I had already hand wound, and I put it in my little bobbin case that I have right here. This is where I store all my stuff. I typically don't save them, but I found one in there, and I thought it might be a good idea to show you what happens after they've kind of already been used. They're really not good anymore. After it's been wound and sitting in here, it loses that tension. So once you're done sharing your project, I haven't been able to salvage a bobbin. So usually you only wind what you need for that project. Then this one, I decided to go ahead and show you these last 3 with a machine wound bobbin. It was very loose, and as you can see, here's the 4/4, and here's this one. So here is the same stitch length, and this one, and tension, but this is the difference between a tightly wound bobbin and a very loosely wound bobbin. And these are all loose, and they're all have the loops and stuff, and we don't want that. So this is pretty much the difference in shearing and what you should be looking for. Remember, you want the nice straight row with just little loops coming through. You do not, or you just want to see your upper thread just a little bit right there to hold that elastic thread in a nice straight line. You don't want these loops. You don't want it so super tight right here where it's not going to have any room to shrink down additionally when it's steamed. Okay, I sewed a whole bunch of different rows in varying widths apart from each row, and we are going to go ahead and give this a steam, and it's going to be really awesome. Let's go ahead. I got a nice hot iron here with steam going, so let's go ahead. There you go. So now this fabric used to be this wide, but because we sheared it, it's nearly half the width because of the shearing. If you are doing a full back on a dress pattern, I would recommend more of the 1/2 inch to 3/4, or probably 3/4 of an inch apart. If you're just doing a few rows, say like on the Charlotte's sunsuit, the 1/2 inch is just fine. If for a big kid's full back, I would do even wider at closer to the inch. So when you're shearing, there's a lot of things to look out for. As you can see, my standard 2-4-6 that I usually use did not work on this one. I ended up using the 4 stitch length, obviously, but the tension, I had to go a lot lower than the 6. I went down to a 2 on this portion of it. And I still feel like my bobbin was still too tightly wound. So you got to be careful when you're winding your bobbin to make sure that it's just, when you're pulling the elastic thread, you can see this little piece right here, so say this is about an inch right here, right there, you can stretch it to like 3.5 inches. So when you're stretching, you probably only want to stretch it to maybe like the 2 inches when you're about that amount of tension when you're winding your bobbin. My very first bobbin that I did with some of this was extremely tight. I wasn't even paying attention. I do remember going like this, and you can see that was that many, or you know, say 2 inches. I mean, I was able to wrap it around a lot because of the amount of tension. So don't wind them too tightly. Don't want them too loose either, or you'll end up with the little loop-de-loos that we got right here. In the stitch length, you don't want it too short of a stitch length, because then when you go to steam it, it won't shrink up anymore. As you can see here, shirring is really cool. This fabric was like how wide that was, and when it's done, or you know, after it's been steamed, feels a lot stronger than it did right here. This still feels really loose, but once you steam it, it shrinks it up. It's got like a nice strong feel to it. So your kids can go in and out of their dresses very easily with this. We have a few free patterns too. We have the Angie's shirred top that uses shirring, and I've made a ton of those into dresses, and we wear them as swimsuit cover-ups. So, and it's very easy. 2 rectangle pieces of fabric, and I use lace for the straps. Easy peasy, and you got cute little swimsuit cover-ups. But yeah, so you can use these on your sleeves as your waistline shirring. You'll just practice around with it and play. The closer they are, the tighter that shirring is going to be, and the more gathering that it will cause. Now, if you do them farther apart, like these ones right here, that's going to be better for the back of a dress on a size 5, 6, 7, 8. If you're doing a smaller size, maybe the 1/2 inch width apart. If you're just doing like the top of a bodice for a dress or a shirt, 1/2 inch is pretty good. Maybe for a baby, you might want to do 3/8. But yeah, it's just a really cool technique. I like to use the shirring also on the Tessa pattern, which is designed for knits or wovens. I do a lot of them in knits because they're tunic length. They cover the kids' tushies. But instead of it just being like a big oversized shirt, I shear in the center right there, and it just looks adorable. So I hope you guys like this technique and play around with it. There's a lot of fun things you can do, and I'd love to see them. You can post your creations in our fan group at facebook.com/groups/SLPCO. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Simple Life Patterns. Whenever you're posting, use hashtag SLPCO so we can see you and maybe feature you in our feed. So we'd just love to see everything that you guys are making. Thank you so much for watching.